Hey there, my sweet friends. Ever wonder what it's like to give your whole heart to family, only to lose a piece of yourself? It's Eva, 65, right here in Eufaula, Alabama. I'm sipping sweet tea on my porch, ready to talk like we're old pals. You all holding up okay? Got any tales to share? Our town's bursting with azaleas, the lake glowing under the moon. I'm itching to dive into something real. This is my second story, just for us gals who've loved till it ached, hoping to keep kin close. So, grab your tea, settle in, and let's chat. Heart to heart. It's about finding our spark again, no matter our years. What's stirring in your soul tonight? Sisters, tell me. Oh. And before we get started, if this story hits home, drop a comment below. Share a moment when you found your own light again. It means the world to hear from y'all. And if you're loving these porch talks, hit that subscribe button to join our little Eufaula circle. We've got more stories to share, and I'd love for you to be part of them. The smell of pumpkin pie still lingers in my memory, sweet and warm. Like a hug from the past, I can close my eyes and see my old kitchen in Oak Ridge, Pennsylvania. The chipped linoleum counter dusted with flour, the oven ticking as it cooled. That morning, a crisp autumn day not so long ago, I'd spent hours mixing the batter, grating fresh nutmeg, and rolling out the crust, just like my mother taught me. It was for Thanksgiving, a day I'd always cherished, a day I thought would bring my family together. I was wrong. My name is Barbara Wilson, and for years, I believed that if I gave enough my time, my money, my heart, my son Michael and his husband Lucas would see me as more than just a checkbook. I'd poured everything into them, even paying off Michael's $120,000 student loan so he could start his life debt-free. I never told him, never wanted him to feel burdened, but standing outside their house that Thanksgiving, holding that pumpkin pie, I realized I'd been holding on to a dream that no longer existed. Let me take you back to that moment, the one that changed everything. The sun was setting over Lakeview Estates, the fancy neighborhood where Michael and Lucas lived. The air was sharp with the scent of fallen leaves, and the street glowed with porch lights and wreaths on every door. Their house, a sleek colonial with big windows, looked like something out of a magazine. I'd driven over with the pie wrapped in foil, my heart light with hope. I thought, maybe this year, we'll sit together, laugh, share stories, like we used to. I could almost hear Michael's boyish giggle from years ago. When he'd sneak a bite of pie before dinner, I parked my old Buick in their driveway, the engine rattling as it shut off. The pie was warm in my hands, the foil crinkling as I walked to the front door. Through the glass, I saw the dining room aglow with candlelight. The table set with crystal glasses and linen napkins. Laughter floated out, bright and carefree. I knocked, my breath fogging in the chilly air. Lucas opened the door, his smile as polished as ever. He was 32, tall and lean, with dark hair swept back and a charm that could melt anyone. "Mother Barbara," he said, his voice honey smooth. "You made it. That pie looks amazing." I smiled, holding it out. "I thought it'd go nice with dinner," I said, my voice soft, hopeful. "It's my mother's recipe. Michael always loved it." Lucas's smile didn't waver, but his eyes shifted, just for a second. "You're so sweet to bring this," he said, taking the pie. "But, tonight's kind of a formal thing. My parents and their friends are here, and it's all a bit stuffy. You'd probably feel out of place." I stood there, the cold seeping through my coat, my hands suddenly empty. "Out of place," I repeated, barely above a whisper. "Yeah," Lucas said, still smiling, as if he were doing me a favor. "It's just a lot of business talk, boring stuff. You wouldn't enjoy it. Why don't you head home? Relax. I'll make sure Michael calls you later." "Okay." I looked past him, into the warm light of the dining room. I could see shadows moving, hear the clink of glasses. Michael was in there somewhere, my boy, but he hadn't come to the door. I wanted to push past Lucas, to say, "I'm his mother. I belong here," but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I nodded, my throat tight. "Thank you." "Lucas," I said, though I didn't know what I was thanking him for. I turned and walked back to my car, the gravel crunching under my boots. The door clicked shut behind me, and the laughter from the house faded. I sat in the driver's seat, staring at the foil tray still warm on the passenger seat, the one I'd made for dessert. The radio was playing Sweet Potato Pie, a cheerful tune about family and gratitude. I laughed, a bitter sound, as tears stung my eyes, driving home. The streets of Oak Ridge blurred through my tears. The town was quiet, its old brick storefronts and maple-lined roads bathed in twilight. I passed the diner, where I used to grab coffee after night shifts, its neon sign buzzing faintly. I passed the park where Michael used to play, the swings now still in the dusk. I thought about the years I'd spent giving everything to my son, my savings, my health, my dreams. I'd paid off his student loans, $120,000, every penny from my retirement fund, so he could chase his dreams without debt. I never told him, never wanted him to feel he owed me, but standing outside that house, I realized they didn't even see me as family anymore. I remembered a Thanksgiving long ago. When Michael was little, it was just the three of us, me, Michael, and my late husband, Robert. Our kitchen was small, the table wobbly, but it was filled with love. Robert would carve the turkey, joking about his terrible knife skills, while Michael smeared mashed potatoes on his cheeks. We'd play the radio, some old James Taylor song, and dance in our socks. Those days felt like a lifetime ago, but they were what I'd been chasing, what I thought I could rebuild with Michael and Lucas. Back home, I parked in my driveway, the house dark except for the porch light. It was a modest place, wood-sided, with a sagging roof I hadn't fixed, because every spare dollar went to Michael. Inside, the kitchen still smelled of pumpkin pie, but it felt hollow now, like a memory that didn't belong to me anymore. I set my purse on this counter, the clock ticking loudly in the silence. I thought about the night shifts at St. Mary's Hospital, the ache in my back after 12 hours on my feet, the lunches I skipped to save a few bucks, all for Michael, all for a family that didn't want me at their table. I sank into a chair, my coat still on, and stared at the phone. I wanted to call Michael, to ask why he didn't come to the door, why he let Lucas send me away, but I didn't. Instead, I thought about the bank account I'd drained to pay off his loans, the retirement I'd postponed, the dreams I'd shelved. I'd given everything, and for what to be told I didn't belong. I remembered something my mother used to say. You can't pour from an empty cup. Barbara. I'd always nodded, but I never understood it until that moment. My cup was empty, and I'd been pouring from it for years. I picked up the phone, not to call Michael, but to call the bank. My hands shook as I dialed, but my voice was steady when I spoke to the teller. I need to stop all transfers to my son's account, I said, effective immediately. The teller paused, her voice kind but professional. Are you sure, Mrs. Wilson? Those have been regular for years. I'm sure, I said, and for the first time in a long time, I meant it. I hung up, the silence settling around me like a blanket. I looked at the clock, 7:32 p.m., and realized Thanksgiving was still happening, but I wasn't part of it. Not anymore. I walked to the kitchen window, the glass cool against my fingertips. Outside, the maple trees were bare, their branches swaying in the wind. The neighbor's house across the street glowed with lights, their own Thanksgiving in full swing. I thought about the years I'd spent believing that if I gave enough, Michael and Lucas would see my worth. I'd paid off his loans, worked myself to the bone, and still, I was standing outside their door. Unwanted, but something shifted in me that night, like a lock clicking into place. I wasn't just Michael's mother, or Lucas's bank, or the woman who said yes to every request. I was Barbara Wilson, and I deserved more than a cold doorstep and an empty kitchen. I deserved to be seen, to be loved, not for what I could give, but for who I was. I turned on the radio, hoping for something to drown out the quiet. Another Thanksgiving song played, all about gratitude and togetherness. This time, I didn't cry. I listened, and I thought, maybe gratitude starts with myself. I'd spent years giving to others, but now it was time to give to me, to my heart, my dreams, my life. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know how Michael would react when he realized the money had stopped, or how Lucas would spin his charm to pull me back in. But as I stood there, the kitchen clock ticking softly, I felt a spark of something new. Not anger, not sadness, but resolve. I'd given everything to my family, but I wouldn't give up on myself. I walked to the counter, picked up the recipe card for my mother's pumpkin pie, and tucked it into a drawer. It wasn't the last pie I'd bake, but it was the last one I'd bake for a family that didn't want me. I turned off the kitchen light, the house falling into darkness, and headed upstairs. Tomorrow was a new day, and for the first time in years, I was ready to face it as Barbara, not just a mother, not just a giver, but a woman who deserved her own light. If you've ever felt like you've given your all only to be left on the outside, I hope you'll share your story in the comments below. It's a hard road, but you're not alone. And if you want to see where this journey takes me through the pain, the growth, and maybe even a little hope, please subscribe to the channel. There's so much more to come, and I'd love for you to be part of it. The kitchen clock was still ticking when I woke up the morning after that Thanksgiving. Its steady rhythm, a reminder that life goes on. Even when your heart feels broken, the house was quiet. The kind of quiet that settles in when you're alone with your thoughts. I stood at the sink, washing the mixing bowl I'd used for the pumpkin pie. The one Lucas had taken with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The water was warm, but my hands felt cold, like the chill from that doorstep had seeped into my bones. I'm Barbara Wilson, and if you're still with me, you know how it felt to stand outside my son's house, unwanted, holding a pie I'd made with all the love I had left. That night, I'd stopped the bank transfers, the ones that kept Michael and Lucas afloat. But to understand why that moment mattered, why it took everything in me to make that call, I need to take you back to the years when I thought giving was the only way to keep my family together. When I paid off Michael's $120,000 student loan and never told a soul. It started a long time ago. In the days when Oak Ridge was my whole world, this little town in Pennsylvania, with its brick storefronts and maple-lined streets, was where I raised Michael, my husband, Robert, and I bought our house on Maple Street right after we married. A wood-sided place with creaky floors and a fireplace that smoked if you didn't open the flue just right. Robert was a hospital administrator at St. Mary's, where I worked as a nurse. We weren't rich, but we were happy, dreaming of a big family. Life had other plans, though. After years of trying, Michael was our only child, a miracle with his father's blue eyes and a laugh that could light up a room. When Michael was 3, we found out he had asthma, the kind that sent us to the ER in the middle of the night. His little chest heaving. I cut back my hours at the hospital to stay home with him, watching his breathing, keeping the nebulizer ready. Those nights bonded us, or so I thought. I'd sit by his bed, reading The Little Engine That Could, whispering, "I think you can, I think you can," until he fell asleep. Robert and I poured everything into giving Michael a good life. We drove old cars, skipped vacations, and saved every penny for his future. Michael was bright, always tinkering with computers, building things from spare parts. When he got into college for computer science, I was over the moon. But Robert never saw him graduate. A heart attack took him when Michael was 20, leaving me a widow at 44. The life insurance barely covered the funeral and the last of our mortgage. I was devastated, but I had Michael to think about. I couldn't fall apart. "Mum, maybe you should sell the house," Michael said one evening, a month after we lost Robert. He was home from college, sitting at our kitchen table, the same one where we'd carved pumpkins and eaten Sunday roasts. "It's too big for just you, and the money could help with my tuition." His words stung, like a paper cut you don't see coming. This was our home, filled with memories of Robert, his toolbox in the garage, his favorite armchair by the fireplace. But I brushed it aside. Michael was grieving too, and he was thinking practically. "This is our home," I told him gently. Your father and I worked hard for it. Besides, where would you stay during breaks? No, I'll pick up extra shifts instead. And that's what I did. For the next 3 years, I worked 60-hour weeks at St. Mary's, often taking the overnight shifts no one wanted. The hospital was a maze of fluorescent lights and beeping monitors. And I'd walk those halls until my feet screamed. I'd grab a coffee and a grilled cheese at the diner down the street. The one with the red vinyl booths and a jukebox that still played Johnny Cash. I'd sit there, counting my tips, calculating how much I could send to Michael's college fund. I didn't mind the exhaustion. Not then. I was doing it for my boy. By the time Michael graduated, I was worn thin, but proud. He was the first in our family with a college degree. A computer science major with a job offer from a tech company right here in Oak Ridge. I did it. Mom, he said, hugging me after the ceremony. His cap tilted on his head. I couldn't have done it without you. Those words were everything. I thought they meant we'd always be close, that he'd never forget what we'd been through together. But a year later, I made the decision that would change everything. I found out Michael still had $120,000 in student loans. Even with all the money I'd sent, the interest was piling up, and he was struggling to keep up with payments on his entry-level salary. I couldn't bear it. I wanted him to have a fresh start, to chase his dreams without that weight. So, I went to the bank and withdrew my entire retirement savings, every penny I'd saved, for a little condo someday. Maybe a place by the lake where I could garden and watch the sunset. It was $120,000, and I used it to pay off his loans in one go. I didn't tell Michael or anyone else. I didn't want him to feel he owed me. Didn't want him to carry that guilt. I thought, this is what mothers do. We lift our children up, even if it means letting go of our own dreams. Michael never knew. And life moved on. He settled into his job, and I kept working at St. Mary's, where Dr. Richard Montgomery, the chief of medicine, always said I was the best nurse on staff. Then Michael met Lucas Parker. Lucas was 32, a banker from Westfield, the wealthier town nearby. He was handsome, with a smile that could sell you the moon. And he came from money. His father owned car dealerships. His mother hosted charity galas. From the start, I knew they moved in a different world. When Michael brought Lucas to our house for dinner, I saw the way Lucas's eyes flicked over my outdated furniture. The family photos on the mantel. Your home is cozy, Lucas said, his tone polite but sharp, like he was sizing up a thrift store find. Michael says you've lived here forever. Yes, I said, trying to warm the moment. Robert and I bought it when we were starting out. It's not much, but it's full of love. Lucas nodded, his smile tight. That's what matters, isn't it? Though Michael and I are looking at places in Lakeview Estates. Have you seen those houses? They're stunning. Lakeview Estates was Oak Ridge's ritziest neighborhood, where houses started at prices I couldn't even dream of. I caught Michael's eye, but he looked away, stirring his coffee. That sounds lovely, I said, my voice faltering. When they got engaged 6 months later, I was happy for Michael, but worried. Lucas's world was so different, polished, expensive, focused on appearances. I tried to be involved in the wedding, but Lucas's mother, Diana, took charge. We've booked the Westfield Country Club. She told me at our first meeting, no need for you to worry. Barbara, I offered to help with the rehearsal dinner, but Diana waved me off. Thomas has connections at Le Chateau. It's all handled. The wedding was extravagant ice sculptures, a band that played for celebrities, guests in designer clothes. I felt out of place in my navy dress, the best I could afford. Michael barely stopped by my table, caught up in Lucas's orbit. You okay? Mom, he asked. His tie loosened after dancing. Of course, sweetheart, I lied, smiling. I'm so happy for you. After the honeymoon, Michael and Lucas bought a house in Lakeview Estates, a sprawling place with a gourmet kitchen and a view of the lake. I wondered how they could afford it on Michael's salary and Lucas's banking job. Lucas's parents helped with the down payment. Michael told me, we've got it under control, but they didn't. A few months later, Michael called, his voice strained. Mom, we're in a bind. The property taxes are higher than we thought. And with Lucas's car payment, can you help just $5,000 to get us through? I didn't hesitate. I sent the money, dipping into the small savings I'd started rebuilding. It became a pattern. Every few months, Lucas or Michael would call with another emergencies, a new air conditioner, Lucas's certifications, a trip they couldn't cancel. I kept sending money, skipping car repairs, ignoring the leaky faucet in my bathroom. I told myself it was temporary, that they'd get on their feet. Lucas was always so grateful, calling me Mother Barbara, sending flowers on my birthday. I thought it meant they cared. But the calls got shorter, the thank yous briefer. Sunday dinners became monthly, then rare. When I visited their house, I noticed new furniture, a fancy espresso machine. While my own home felt shabbier by the day, I started to wonder if I was just a bank to them, a safety net they could always count on. One night, after a double shift at St. Mary's, I sat in the diner nursing a coffee. The jukebox played Ring of Fire, and I stared at my reflection in the window, my grey hair tucked under a scarf, my eyes tired. I thought about the $120,000 I'd paid for Michael's loans, the retirement I'd given up. I'd done it for love, but love wasn't supposed to feel like this, like I was disappearing. Piece by piece, I drove home. The stars bright over Oak Ridge. My house was dark, the porch light flickering. I walked inside, the floor creaking under my feet, and sat at the kitchen table. The clock ticked, steady as always. I thought about Thanksgiving, just a few weeks away. I pictured us together, Michael, Lucas, and me, sharing pie, laughing like we used to. I held on to that image, fragile as it was, because it was all I had left. But as I learned that night, standing outside their door, hope can be a heavy thing to carry. I'd given everything, my savings, my health, my heart, and still, I wasn't enough. Not for Lucas's polished world, not for Michael's new life. The pumpkin pie was gone, but the taste of that moment lingered, bitter and sharp. It was time to find out who I was when I stopped giving. When I started choosing myself. The leaves were falling faster now, carpeting the sidewalks of Oak Ridge in shades of gold and crimson. I'd always loved autumn, the way it painted the town with colors that felt both fleeting and eternal. But that season, a few weeks after that lonely Thanksgiving, the beauty felt distant, like a postcard from someone else's life. My kitchen, with its chipped linoleum and the faint smell of cinnamon from forgotten baking days, was my refuge. But even there, the quiet pressed in, heavy with questions I wasn't ready to answer. I'm Barbara Wilson, and if you've followed me this far, you know the sting of standing outside my son Michael's house, holding a pumpkin pie that never made it to the table. You know I'd given everything, my savings, my health, my heart, to keep Michael and his husband Lucas afloat. I'd paid off Michael's $120,000 student loan, a secret I kept to give him a clean slate, only to be told I didn't belong at their Thanksgiving dinner. That night, I'd stopped the bank transfers, the ones Lucas always asked for with a smile, but stopping the money was just the beginning. Doubt had taken root, and it was growing, like weeds in the garden I hadn't tended in years. It started with a phone call. About 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, I was sitting at my kitchen table, sipping coffee that had gone cold, when my phone buzzed. Lucas's name flashed on the screen, and my stomach tightened. I almost didn't answer, but habit won out. Hello. Lucas, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Mother Barbara. His tone was bright, like nothing had happened. How are you holding up? I've been meaning to call. You know, to thank you for that pie. It was a hit. I gripped the phone, picturing him in their sleek Lakeview Estates home, probably standing by that fancy espresso machine I'd seen last time I visited, and say, I'm glad, I said, keeping my words short. What's on your mind? He laughed. A little too easily. You know how it is. Always something with the house. The heating system's acting up, and with winter coming, we can't risk it. I hate to ask, but could you help us out? Maybe $3,000 to cover the repairs. I closed my eyes, the familiar ache settling in my chest. It was always something: a new roof, a car payment, some urgent bill. I'd been sending money for years, ever since they bought that house, dipping into the little I had left after paying off Michael's loans. I thought about my own house, the faucet that dripped in the bathroom, the roof that needed patching. "Lucas," I said slowly. "I stopped the transfers. I can't keep doing this." There was a pause. Then his voice softened, almost pleading. "I know, Mother Barbara, and I feel awful asking. It's just temporary, I promise. We're so close to getting on our feet. You've always been our rock." His words were smooth, like honey poured over a wound. But they didn't soothe me anymore. I thought about the Thanksgiving dinner, the way he'd sent me away with a smile. "I need to think about it," I said, and hung up before he could say more. I sat there, staring at the phone, my coffee untouched. The clock on the wall ticked, steady and unyielding. I remembered the first time Lucas asked for money. Not long after they moved into that house, Michael had called. His voice strained. "Mom, the property taxes are higher than we expected. Lucas says it's just a rough patch. Can you help? I'd sent $5,000 that time, then more, every few months." Lucas always made it sound so reasonable, so temporary. He'd call me Mother Barbara, send flowers on my birthday, and I'd thought it meant he cared. But now I wasn't so sure. That afternoon, I drove to the farmer's market in Oak Ridge, needing to clear my head. The market was a weekend ritual, with stalls of apples, homemade jams, and pumpkins still lingering from fall. The air smelled of cider and wood smoke, and families milled about, kids tugging at their parents' sleeves. I was browsing a table of honey jars when my phone pinged. It was a notification from Instagram, one of those apps I barely used. Curious, I opened it and saw Lucas had posted a photo. There he was, grinning in a tailored coat, holding a shiny new watch, a Rolex, by the look of it. The caption read, "Treating myself to a little sparkle, living the dream." I stood there, the market buzzing around me, and felt a heat rise in my chest. A Rolex. While he was asking me for $3,000 to fix a heater, I thought about the nights I'd skipped dinner to save a few dollars, the car repairs I'd put off, the retirement I'd given up to pay off Michael's loans. I'd poured $120,000 into his future, and Lucas was buying watches while I couldn't fix my own roof. I put the phone away, my hands trembling. The market felt too loud now, the colors too bright. I bought a small jar of honey, more out of habit than want, and drove home. The doubt that had started on Thanksgiving was growing, twisting into something sharper. Was I just a bank to them, a safety net they could tap whenever they needed? Back at home, I tried to distract myself by tending to my garden, or what was left of it. The rose bushes along the fence were overgrown, their blooms faded and drooping. I knelt in the dirt, pruning shears in hand, but my mind kept drifting. I remembered a moment from years ago, when Michael was in high school. He'd wanted to go to a summer coding camp, but we couldn't afford it. I'd picked up extra shifts at Sane, Mary's working doubles until my eyes burned. When I gave him the check, he'd hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "You're the best." "Mom," he'd said. That memory used to warm me, but now it felt like a weight. When had my son stopped seeing me as more than a solution to his problems? The next day, I was at St. Mary's finishing a shift in the cardiac unit. The hospital was its usual hum of activity, nurses calling out orders, monitors beeping, the smell of antiseptic in the air. I was charting at the nurse's station when Maria, a young nurse who'd started a few months ago, plopped down beside me. She was 28, with dark curls and a laugh that could cut through the tension of a long shift. "You look tired." "Miss Barbara," she said, nudging my shoulder. "When's the last time you took a day off?" I smiled, though it felt forced. "I'm fine, Maria. Just the usual." She raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. "You work harder than anyone here. You need a break. Hey, there's a painting class at the community center starting next week. You should come with me. It's fun, and they serve tea." Painting, I chuckled, shaking my head. I haven't held a brush since grade school. So it's not about being good, it's about doing something for you. She leaned closer, her voice softening. You deserve that, you know. Her words hit me harder than I expected. Doing something for me. I couldn't remember the last time I'd thought that way. My life had been about Michael, about keeping him safe, successful, happy. I'd paid off his loans, sent money to Lucas, worked until my body ached. But for me, there was nothing left. I'll think about it, I said, and Maria grinned, satisfied for now. That weekend, I drove to Michael and Lucas's house, unannounced. I told myself I just wanted to see Michael, to talk face to face after Thanksgiving, but deep down, I needed to know if my doubts were real. Their house looked even grander in daylight, the lawn manicured, the windows gleaming. I knocked, and Michael answered, looking surprised but pleased. Mom, what are you doing here? Just missed you, I said, hugging him. He felt thinner, his eyes tired despite his smile. Lucas appeared behind him, all charm. Mother Barbara, come in. Come in. Want some coffee? We just got this new machine top of the line. I stepped inside, and my breath caught. The living room was like something from a showroom, a buttery leather sofa, a crystal chandelier, a sleek TV mounted on the wall. I thought about Lucas's call, his plea for $3,000. This is nice, I said, my voice careful. That sofa looks expensive. Lucas laughed, waving a hand. Oh, it's an investment. You know how it is, got to impress the right people. My boss comes over sometimes, and we need to look the part. I nodded, but my stomach churned. I glanced at Michael, hoping he'd say something, but he was fidgeting with his phone, avoiding my eyes. Lucas, I said, keeping my tone light. I thought you were having trouble with the heater. Did you get it fixed? His smile faltered, just for a second. Yeah, we're working on it. It's a big house, always something breaking. He changed the subject, offering me a tour of their new patio, but I barely listened. The seeds of doubt were sprouting, and I couldn't ignore them anymore. On the drive home, I stopped at the diner, needing a moment to think. The place was quiet, the lunch rush over, the jukebox playing Stand By Me. I ordered a coffee and sat in my usual booth, the red vinyl creaking under me. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, something I hadn't done in weeks. My savings account was nearly empty, just a few thousand left after years of sending money to Michael and Lucas. But then I saw it, a recent statement from a loan I'd co-signed for them. Something Lucas said was for home improvements. There was a withdrawal. $10,000 dated a week ago. The same week Lucas posted that Rolex. I set the phone down, my hands shaking. The coffee tasted bitter now. Or maybe that was just my heart. I thought about the $120,000 I'd paid for Michael's loans, the nights I'd worked until dawn, the dreams I'd let go. I'd given everything to keep their world spinning. But what was it for? A watch, a sofa, a life I wasn't even part of. I drove home, the sunset painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. My house looked small and tired, the paint peeling, the roses neglected. I sat on the porch, the old swing creaking under me, and let the truth settle in. Lucas wasn't just asking for help, he was using me. And Michael, my boy, was letting him. The doubt wasn't just a seed anymore. It was a vine, wrapping around my heart, and I knew I couldn't ignore it much longer. The first snow of the season dusted Oak Ridge that morning, a soft blanket over the maple trees and the old brick storefronts. I stood at my kitchen window, a mug of tea warming my hands, watching the flakes settle on the rose bushes I hadn't pruned since summer. The world looked peaceful, but inside me a storm was brewing. Doubt had taken root after that Thanksgiving, when Lucas sent me away from Michael's door, and it had grown with every call, every excuse, every glimpse of their polished life. I'm Barbara Wilson, and if you've been with me, you know I'd given everything, my savings, my health, my heart to my son and his husband. I'd paid off Michael's $120,000 student loan, a secret I kept to give him a fresh start, only to be left standing in the cold. Now, I was starting to see the truth, and it was uglier than I'd ever imagined. It began with an email, one I almost missed amid the clutter of hospital newsletters and grocery ads. I was sitting at my kitchen table, the clock ticking its familiar rhythm. When I opened my laptop to check my account, the subject line caught my eye, you need to know. It was from Clara Parker, Lucas's older sister, someone I'd met only once at the wedding. Her message was short, but it hit like a punch, Mrs. Wilson, I'm sorry to do this, but you deserve the truth. Lucas isn't who he seems. Check the attachments. Call me if you need to talk. My hands hovered over the keyboard, a chill running through me that had nothing to do with the snow outside. I opened the first attachment, a screenshot of a bank statement. It showed a series of transactions, hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars, going to an account linked to DraftKings, one of those online betting apps I'd seen advertised during football games. The date stretched back months, some matching the times Lucas had called me for emergencies. Another attachment was a text exchange between Clara and Lucas, where she confronted him. You're gambling again, aren't you? How much this time? His reply was curt. Mind your own business. Clara, I leaned back in my chair, the mug of tea forgotten. The clock ticked, loud in the silence. I thought about the $120,000 I'd paid for Michael's student loans, the retirement savings I'd drained to give him a future. I thought about the $10,000 withdrawal I'd found on the loan I'd co-signed. The one Lucas said was for home improvements. I thought about his Instagram post, that shiny Rolex glinting on his wrist, while he asked me for $3,000 to fix a heater. The pieces were falling into place, and they painted a picture I didn't want to see. I called Clara, my fingers trembling as I dialed. She answered on the second ring, her voice low and steady. Mrs. Wilson, I'm so sorry, she said. I've been wrestling with whether to tell you. Lucas is my brother, but what he's doing isn't right. Clara, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Is he gambling my money? She sighed, heavy and tired. Yes. He's been at it for years, off and on. I thought he'd stopped, but then I saw those transactions. He's using your money and Michael's to feed his habit. I checked the account because I was worried about my parents getting dragged into it. Lucas is good at hiding things, but he's not as smart as he thinks. I closed my eyes, the weight of her words settling in my chest. Thank you. Clara, I managed. I needed to know. You don't deserve this, she said. Lucas always knows what to say, how to make people trust him. But you're not just anyone. You're Michael's mom, and you've given too much already. We hung up, and I sat there, staring at the laptop screen. The snow outside was falling harder now, blanketing the garden in white. I remembered the first time I met Lucas, at my house for dinner. He'd complimented my cooking, called my home cozy, but his eyes had lingered on the faded curtains, the scuffed floors. I'd thought he was just nervous, meeting his future mother-in-law. Now, I saw it for what it was: calculation. He'd been sizing me up, figuring out how much I could give. I knew I had to confront him. Not over the phone, not through Michael. Face to face. I needed to see his eyes, to hear his voice, to know if Clara was right. I called Lucas and asked to meet at the diner on Main Street, the one with the red vinyl booths and the jukebox that played oldies. Sure. Mother Barbara, he said, his tone as smooth as ever. What's up, everything, Kay? Just need to talk, I said, keeping my voice calm. Tomorrow, noon. Sounds good, he said, and I could almost hear his smile. See you then. The diner was busy when I arrived, the air thick with the smell of coffee and fried onions. I slid into a booth by the window, the vinyl creaking under me, and ordered a tea. The jukebox was playing Blue Bayou, Roy Orbison's voice soft and mournful. I watched the snow fall outside, dusting the parked cars, and tried to steady my nerves. My hands were clasped tight in my lap, the bank statements printed and tucked in my purse. Lucas walked in at exactly noon, his coat tailored, his hair perfect despite the weather. He flashed that megawatt smile, sliding into the booth across from me. Mother Barbara, he said, leaning forward. You look great. This place is a classic. Huh. I nodded, not returning his smile. Lucas, we need to talk about the money. His eyebrows lifted, but the smile stayed. Money. Oh, you mean the heater thing? I know I asked for a lot, but not just the heater, I interrupted, my voice low but firm. I pulled the bank statements from my purse and slid them across the table. These are from the loan I co-signed. The one you said was for home improvements. There's $10,000 gone. Lucas, and these transactions to DraftKings, what are they? His smile faltered, just for a moment, and his eyes flicked to the papers. Then he leaned back, laughing softly. Mother Barbara, you've been doing some detective work. Huh, look, those are just investments. A buddy of mine had a tip, and I thought I'd try it out. It didn't pan out, but I'll cover it, I promise. Investments, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Lucas, I've been sending you money for years. I paid off Michael's student loans, $120,000, so he could have a future. I gave up my retirement for that. And you're telling me you're using my money to gamble. His face changed then, the charm slipping like a mask. His eyes narrowed, and he leaned forward, his voice low. Whoa, hold on. Nobody asked you to pay off Michael's loans. That was your choice, not mine. And yeah, I made a few bets, but it's not like I'm some addict. I'm trying to build something here, for me and Michael. You don't understand the pressure we're under. I stared at him, my heart pounding. Pressure, Lucas. I worked night shifts until my feet bled to keep you two afloat. I skipped meals, put off fixing my house. Also, you could have your fancy sofa and your Rolex. And you're telling me I don't understand. He flinched, but only for a second. You're twisting this, he said, his tone hardening. I'm doing what I have to for our family. Michael's happy, isn't he? That's what you wanted. Don't make this about me. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. The jukebox had switched to I Fall to Pieces, and the irony wasn't lost on me. Lucas, I said, my voice calm but unyielding. I'm not your bank. I've given enough. I'm done. His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he'd argue, but he just shook his head, forcing a smile. Fine. I'll figure it out. But don't expect Michael to be happy about this. He counts on you, you know. I didn't respond. I watched him stand, toss a few dollars on the table for the coffee he hadn't ordered, and walk out. The bell above the door jingled as he left, and I sat there, the bank statement still in front of me. The tea was cold now, but I didn't care. I felt something shift inside me, like a door opening to a room I'd forgotten existed. I wasn't just angry, I was awake. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the snow piling up outside. The clock ticked, steady as ever, and I thought about the years I'd spent giving to Lucas and Michael. I remembered the flowers Lucas sent, the way he'd call me Mother Barbara, the promises that it was all temporary. I'd believed him because I wanted to believe in the family we were supposed to be. But Clara's email, those bank statements, had torn that illusion apart. I opened my laptop again, checking the loan account. The $10,000 withdrawal was just the latest. There were others, smaller but consistent, going back months. I thought about the loan I'd co-signed, the one that tied my credit to their choices. If Lucas defaulted, it could ruin me. I'd already lost my retirement savings to Michael's loans, and I had little left to lose. But I wasn't going to let Lucas take that, too. I called my lawyer, Martin Goldstein, the same man who'd helped me after Robert died. His office was closed, but I left a message, my voice shaking but clear. Martin, it's Barbara Wilson. I need to talk about a loan I co-signed for my son. I think I'm in trouble. I hung up, the silence settling around me. The snow outside was thick now, covering the garden, the roses, the world I'd known. I thought about Michael, my boy, and wondered if he knew about Lucas's gambling. Did he suspect, or was he too caught up in Lucas's charm to see I wanted to call him, to ask? But I didn't. Not yet. I needed to protect myself first, something I hadn't done in years. I walked to the living room, the floor creaking under my feet, and stood by the fireplace. The mantel held a photo of Michael, taken at his college graduation. his smile wide and proud. Next to it was a picture of Robert and me, laughing on our porch swing. Back when life felt simple, I touched the frame, my fingers tracing Robert's face. "I tried, honey," I whispered. "I tried to keep us together." The fire was out, but the embers still glowed faintly. I sat on the couch, pulling a quilt over my lap, and let the truth sink in. Lucas wasn't just taking my money, he was gambling it away, risking everything I'd worked for. And Michael, my Michael, was letting it happen. The doubt I'd felt was no longer a seed or a vine. It was a fire, small but growing, and it was time to let it burn. The snow had stopped falling by the time I woke up the next morning, leaving Oak Ridge under a quiet white blanket. From my bedroom window, I could see the garden, the rose bushes buried under drifts, their thorns hidden but still sharp. The world outside looked soft, but inside me something hard was taking shape. I'm Barbara Wilson, and if you've followed me this far, you know the ache of learning a truth you didn't want to face. I'd discovered Lucas's gambling, the way he'd used my money I'd scraped together from years of night shifts to feed his addiction. I'd confronted him, seen the mask slip, and now I was staring down a harder truth. My son, Michael, was part of this. I'd paid off his $120,000 student loan, given up my retirement to set him free. And yet, he'd stood by while Lucas pushed me out of their lives. I was in the kitchen, stirring sugar into my coffee, when the doorbell rang. It was barely 8 at time. Me. Too early for visitors. And my heart sank. I knew who it was before I opened the door. Michael stood on the porch, his breath fogging in the cold, his face flushed with something between anger and worry. He was 35 now, but in his rumpled jacket and untidy hair, he looked like the boy who'd once run to me with scraped knees. "Mom," he said, his voice sharp. "What's going on? Lucas says you're cutting us off. He says you accused him of gambling. Why didn't you talk to me first?" I stepped aside, letting him in. The house smelled faintly of last night's fire, the embers still glowing in the fireplace. "Come in." "Michael," I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my chest. "We need to talk." He followed me to the living room, but he didn't sit. He paced, his boots leaving damp tracks on the hardwood. "Lucas is freaking out, Mom. He says you went through our bank statements, that you're making things up. We need that money. You can't just stop like that." I stood by the mantel, my fingers brushing the frame of a photo Michael at his college graduation. Smiling wide, I took a deep breath, the weight of the past few weeks pressing down. "Michael, sit down," I said, softer now. "I'm not making things up. I have proof. Lucas has been gambling, using the money I've sent you, the money from the loan I co-signed. I saw the transactions, DraftKings, thousands of dollars. He's not fixing heaters or paying taxes. He's betting it away." Michael stopped pacing, his face paling. He sank onto the couch, running a hand through his hair. "That's not... Lucas wouldn't do that. He told me it was just a bad investment, a one-time thing. He's under a lot of stress. Mom, his job, the house, it's a lot." I sat across from him, my hands clasped tight in my lap. The clock on the wall ticked, a reminder that time didn't pause for pain. "Michael," I said, my voice breaking, "I paid off your student loans. $120,000. Every penny of my retirement savings. I never told you because I didn't want you to feel you owed me. I wanted you to have a future, to be free. But I've been working myself to death to keep you and Lucas afloat. And he's gambling it away. And you let him send me away on Thanksgiving." His eyes widened, and for a moment, he looked like he'd been slapped. "You paid off my loans," he whispered. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I loved you," I said, tears stinging my eyes. "Because I thought it was what mothers do. But I was wrong to think love meant giving everything, even when it hurt me. I stood outside your house, Michael, holding a pie I made for you, and Lucas told me I didn't belong. Where were you? Why didn't you come to the door?" He looked down, his hands twisting together. I didn't know he'd do that. I was in the kitchen, helping with the food. "I thought you were just dropping off the pie. Lucas said you didn't want to stay." I shook my head. the hurt raw and sharp. He lied. Michael. And you believed him. You've been believing him for years, letting him ask me for money, letting him treat me like a bank. Do you know what it's cost me? My health, my savings, my dreams. I can't even fix the roof on this house because every dollar went to you. Michael's face crumpled, and for a moment, I saw the boy he used to be, the one who'd hug me and promise to make me proud. Mom, I'm sorry, he said, his voice cracking. I didn't know about the loans. I didn't know how much you were giving. Lucas handles the finances. He said we needed help, and I trusted him. I wanted to reach out, to hold him, but I stayed still. Michael, I love you. You're my son, and that will never change. But you have to see what's happening. Lucas has a gambling problem. Clara showed me the proof bank statements, texts. He's not just making bad investments. He's addicted, and he's dragging you down with him. Michael shook his head, his eyes wet. No, he's not like that. He loves me. He's trying to build a life for us. You don't understand how much pressure we're under, how important it is to keep up appearances. If I push him, if I make him stop, he might leave. I can't lose him. Mom. His words hit like a blow, and I felt a pang of grief, not just for him, but for myself. I'd spent years living for Michael, giving up pieces of myself to keep him safe, and now he was living for Lucas, afraid to lose a man who was tearing them apart. Michael, I said, my voice soft but firm, you can't live your life scared of losing someone. I did that for years, thinking if I gave enough, you'd stay close, but I lost myself instead. Don't make the same mistake. He didn't answer, just stared at the floor. His shoulders slumped. The silence stretched, broken only by the ticking clock and the faint crackle of the fire. I wanted to shake him, to make him see, but I knew I couldn't. He had to find his own way, just as I was finding mine. The doorbell rang again, startling us both. I stood, wiping my eyes, and went to answer it. It was David Chen, Michael's childhood friend, standing on the porch with a shy smile. David was a teacher now, with a kind face and a quiet strength that reminded me of Robert. Mrs. Wilson, he said, brushing snow from his coat. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. There's a community event at the park this weekend. Thought you might like to come. I glanced back at Michael, still on the couch, lost in his thoughts. David, this isn't a great time, I said, but I managed a small smile. Come in for a minute. He stepped inside, noticing Michael. Hey. Mike, he said, his tone warm but cautious. Didn't expect to see you here. Michael looked up, forcing a nod. Hey, David. Just talking to Mom. David's eyes flicked between us, sensing the tension. He turned to me, his voice gentle. Mrs. Wilson, you've always been the best mom I know. Whatever's going on, you don't have to carry it alone. The park event's got music, food, kids running around with those little American flags. It's simple, but it's nice. You should come. His kindness caught me off guard, and I felt a lump in my throat. Thank you. David, I said, I'll think about it. He nodded, then looked at Michael. You okay, man? You look like you haven't slept. Michael shrugged, his voice flat. Just dealing with some stuff. David didn't push, just clapped Michael on the shoulder. Hang in there. And Mrs. Wilson, let me know about the event. My mum's going, too. She'd love to see you. He left, the door closing softly behind him. I turned back to Michael, who was staring at the photo on the mantel. David's right, I said quietly. You don't look okay. And neither do I. We can't keep doing this. Michael, I love you, but I can't save you from Lucas's choices. You have to face them yourself. He stood, his face a mix of anger and pain. You're asking me to choose between you and him, he said. That's not fair. I'm not asking you to choose, I said, my voice breaking. I'm asking you to see the truth. Lucas needs help, professional help for his gambling, and you need to decide what kind of life you want. I've given you everything. Michael, I paid off your loans, worked until I could barely stand, but I can't live your life for you. He didn't answer, just grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. I need to think, he muttered. I'll call you later. The door slammed, and I stood there, the house echoing with his absence. I sank onto the couch, the quilt still warm from where he'd sat. The fire was dying now, the embers fading to grey. I thought about the years I'd spent believing love meant sacrifice, that giving was the only way to keep Michael close. I'd paid off his loans, sent money to Lucas, worked until my body ached, and for what? To watch my son choose a man who was gambling their future away. I remembered a moment from long ago. When Michael was 10, he'd built a model rocket for a school project, but it wouldn't launch. He'd cried, frustrated, and I'd sat with him in the garage, helping him rewire the circuits. You can't give up, sweetheart, I'd said. Sometimes you have to fix what's broken. He'd hugged me, his tears soaking my shirt, and we'd launched that rocket into the sky. I'd thought then that we'd always fix things together. But now, I wasn't sure he wanted to fix anything. I stood and walked to the porch, the swing creaking under me. The snow was pristine, untouched except for Michael's footprints leading away. I thought about David's invitation, the community event with music and flags. It was a small thing, but it felt like a lifeline. A reminder that there was a world beyond this house, beyond the pain of losing my son to Lucas's lies. I went back inside, picked up the phone, and called my lawyer. Martin, he answered this time, his voice calm and familiar. Barbara, I got your message. What's going on with that loan? I need to get out of it, I said, my voice firm. I co-signed for Michael and Lucas, and I can't risk my credit if they default. I need to know my options. Let's meet tomorrow, he said. Bring everything you have, statements, emails, anything that shows what's happening. We'll figure this out. I hung up, feeling a strange mix of fear and relief. I'd spent years giving to Michael, but now I was taking something back, my future, my safety, my worth. The fire was out, but the embers still glowed faintly, and I knew I had to keep them alive. For me, the winter sun was low in Oak Ridge, casting long shadows across the snow-dusted streets. I stood on my porch, the old swing creaking under me, a mug of chamomile tea warming my hands. The air smelled of pine and wood smoke, a reminder that life was moving forward, even if my heart was still catching up. I'm Barbara Wilson, and if you've been with me, you know the weight of confronting my son Michael, of telling him I'd paid off his $120,000 student loan only to watch him defend Lucas's gambling. That morning, after he'd left in a storm of anger and hurt, I'd felt like I'd lost him for good, but something else was stirring inside me, a spark, faint but growing, that whispered I could find myself again, even after all I'd given away. The days after our fight were quiet, too quiet. The house, with its creaky floors and faded curtains, felt like a museum of memories. Robert's armchair by the fireplace, Michael's old rocket models on the shelf. I'd spent years filling this place with love, but it had become a shrine to what I'd lost. I thought about David Chen's invitation to the community event, the one with music and little American flags. It was a small thing, but Maria's words from the hospital echoed in my mind. You deserve to do something for you. Maybe it was time to try. That afternoon, I drove to the community center, a brick building near the park with a sign that read, Winter Art Classes. Maria had been relentless, texting me about the painting class, and I'd finally said yes, more to quiet her than because I believed I'd enjoy it. The room was bright, with long tables covered in paint tubes and brushes, and the air smelled of turpentine and possibility. Maria waved me over, her dark curls bouncing. Miss Barbara, you made it. Grab a canvas. We're doing still lifes today. I hesitated, feeling out of place among the younger faces, but Maria handed me a smock and pointed to a seat. Just try it, she said, her smile infectious. No pressure. I sat, staring at this bowl of apples and pears in front of me. The teacher, a woman with silver hair and kind eyes, talked about light and shadow, but I barely listened. I dipped a brush in red paint and made a tentative stroke. It was clumsy, nothing like the perfect curves of the apples, but it felt freeing. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about Michael or Lucas or the money I'd given away. I was just Barbara, painting a lopsided apple under the soft glow of a winter afternoon. As I cleaned my brushes, Maria leaned over, grinning. Not bad for a first try. "Miss Barbara, you coming back next week?" I laughed, surprising myself. "Maybe. It's been a while since I did something just for fun." "That's the spirit," she said, nudging my shoulder. "You've got a spark. You know, don't let it go out." Her words stayed with me as I drove home. The sky turning pink over Oak Ridge. The town was settling into winter, with Christmas lights starting to twinkle on porches. I passed the diner, its neon sign buzzing, and thought about the confrontation with Lucas, the bank statements that had shattered his charm. I'd called my lawyer, Martin, and we'd met to discuss the loan I'd co-signed. "You need to pay it off." "Barbara," he'd said, his voice gentle but firm. "If Lucas defaults, it'll ruin your credit. You've got just enough left in your savings to cover it." So I did. I withdrew the last of my savings, $50,000, and paid off the loan. Severing the financial tie to Lucas and Michael, it hurt, knowing I'd have to keep working at St. Mary's well past retirement age, but it also felt like freedom. I was done being their safety net. Back home, I found a voicemail from Ellen, my neighbor across the street. She was a retired librarian, with a laugh that could fill a room and a garden that was the envy of Oak Ridge. "Barbara, it's Ellen." Her voice crackled through the phone. "I'm starting a gardening club, just a few of us planting bulbs for spring. You've got those roses out back. Come join us tomorrow. We'll have coffee and gossip." I smiled, picturing Ellen in her straw hat, digging in the dirt. My roses had been neglected for years, their blooms choked by weeds. Maybe it was time to tend to them. And to myself, I called her back, my voice lighter than it had been in weeks. "Count me in." "Ellen, I could use some dirt under my nails." The gardening club met in Ellen's backyard, a cozy space with trellises of ivy and pots of winter pansies. There were 4 of us, Ellen, me, and 2 other women from the neighborhood, their hands weathered but gentle as they handled the bulbs. The air was crisp, smelling of damp earth and coffee from a thermos Ellen passed around. "Tulips need to go deep," Ellen said, kneeling beside me. "Give 'em a good home, and they'll bloom like crazy come spring." I pressed a bulb into the soil, the dirt cool against my fingers. "My roses used to be my pride," I said almost to myself. "I let them go, got too busy." Ellen looked at me, her eyes sharp but kind. "Roses are tough, Barbara. They just need a little love to come back. Kinda like us, don't you think?" I laughed, the sound surprising me. "You're not wrong." As we worked, Ellen told stories her late husband's terrible cooking, her adventures in a book club that read only mysteries. I felt a warmth I hadn't in years, a sense of belonging that didn't demand anything from me. For the first time, I wasn't Michael's mom or Lucas's bank. I was just Barbara, planting tulips in a friend's garden, sipping coffee under a winter sky. That evening, I was washing dishes when my phone rang. Lucas's name flashed on the screen, and my heart skipped. I'd been dreading this call, knowing he wouldn't give up easily. I let it ring twice before answering, my voice calm. "Hello, Lucas." "Mother Barbara," he said, his tone smooth but strained. "I owe you an apology. I got defensive at the diner, and I shouldn't have. Look, I messed up with those bets, but it's not what you think. I'm fixing it, I swear. Can we start over? We really need your help, just one more time." I set the dish down, the suds dripping onto the counter. I thought about the bank statements, Clara's warning, the $120,000 I'd paid for Michael's future. I thought about the roses, the tulips, the painting class, the small steps I was taking to reclaim my life. "Lucas," I said, my voice steady, "I'm not your bank. I've given you and Michael everything I had, and it's not enough. You need help, real help, for your gambling. But it's not coming from me." There was a pause, and when he spoke, his charm was gone, replaced by a hard edge. "You're making a mistake, Barbara. Michael's not going to be happy about this." He needs me, and we need that money. Don't do this to him. I closed my eyes, picturing Michael's face, the way he'd looked when he left. Michael will figure it out, I said. And so will you. Goodbye, Lucas. I hung up, my hands shaking but my heart steady. I walked to the living room, the fire crackling softly. The photo of Michael on the mantel caught my eye, his graduation smile frozen in time. I thought about the rocket we'd built together, the nights I'd sat by his bed when he couldn't breathe. I'd always thought love meant giving everything, but now I saw it differently. Love meant boundaries. Too loving myself enough to say no. Loving Michael enough to let him face his choices. The next evening, I got a call from Dr. Richard Montgomery, the chief of medicine at St. Mary's. We'd worked together for years, his steady presence a comfort in the chaos of the hospital. Barbara, he said, his voice warm. I'm taking a chance here. There's a new Italian place downtown. Bella Vita. Would you like to have dinner with me this Friday? I froze, the phone pressed to my ear. Richard was a widower, kind and distinguished, with eyes that crinkled when he smiled. We'd shared coffee breaks, late-night talks during shifts, but I'd never thought of him as anything more. At 62, I'd assumed that part of my life romance possibility was over. Dinner, I said, my voice catching. Like a date. He chuckled, a sound that eased my nerves. Yes, like a date. If that's okay with you. I looked around my living room, the quilt on the couch, the fire glowing. I thought about the painting class, the tulips, the roses waiting for spring. I'd like that, I said, a smile creeping into my voice. Friday sounds perfect. We set the time, and I hung up, my heart fluttering in a way I hadn't felt since I was young. I stood by the window, watching the snowflakes dance under the streetlight. Oak Ridge was quiet, its houses glowing with warmth. I thought about the years I'd spent living for Michael, giving until I had nothing left. I'd paid off his loans, sent money to Lucas, worked until my body begged for rest. But now, I was choosing me, my art, my garden, my heart. Friday came, and I found myself nervous, fussing with my hair in a way I hadn't in years. I chose a deep green dress, one I'd bought for a hospital gala but never worn, and added a silver scarf to hide the dated neckline. Bella Vita was cozy, with candlelit tables and the smell of garlic and fresh bread. Richard was waiting when I arrived, his grey suit impeccable, his smile warm. Barbara, he said, standing to pull out my chair. You look beautiful. I blushed, feeling like a girl again. Thank you. Richard, this place is lovely. Dinner was a blur of pasta, red wine, and conversation that flowed like a river. We talked about books, music, the hospital's quirks. He told me about his late wife, Emily, and I shared stories of Robert. Our voices soft with memory, but not weighed down. You've always been so strong. Barbara, Richard said, his eyes meeting mine. But I've watched you carry too much. I hope you're finding some lightness now. I thought about the painting class, the gardening club, the decision to stop Lucas's demands. I'm trying, I said, my voice honest. It's new, but it feels right. He reached across the table, his hand brushing mine, and I felt a warmth I'd forgotten was possible. It suits you, he said simply. When he drove me home, the stars were bright over Oak Ridge. He walked me to the door, his hand light on my arm. I'd like to see you again, he said, his voice soft. Maybe a concert next time. I'd like that, I said, my heart full. He leaned in, his lips brushing my cheek, a gentle promise of more to come. Good night, Barbara, he said. Good night, Richard. I stepped inside. The house quiet, but not empty. The fire was out, but the embers glowed, and I felt them in me, too a spark of hope, of possibility. The next morning, I drove to Ellen's garden, the tulip bulbs we'd planted now buried under snow. I stood by the roses, their thorns softened by frost, and thought about the life I was building one brushstroke, one bulb, one dinner at a time. I'd given everything to Michael and Lucas, but now I was giving to myself, and for the first time, it felt like enough. If you're wondering whether I'll keep the spark alive, or what happens when Michael and Lucas face the truth, I hope you'll stick with me. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to choose yourself over someone you love? And please, subscribe to the channel to see where this journey goes. The road ahead is full of surprises, and I'd love for you to be part of it. The snow was falling again in Oak Ridge, soft flakes drifting past the streetlights, turning the town into a quiet winter postcard. I stood at my kitchen window, watching the world blanket itself in white, a cup of coffee cooling in my hands. The house was warm, the fireplace crackling softly, but a chill lingered inside me, not from the cold, but from the weight of what I'd done. I'm Barbara Wilson, and if you've been with me, you know the pain of standing up to my son Michael, of telling him I'd paid off his $120,000 student loan only to see him walk away, caught in Lucas's web of lies. You know I'd confronted Lucas about his gambling, cut off the money, and paid off the loan I'd co-signed to protect myself. I'd started painting, planting, even saying yes to a date with Richard, but just when I thought I'd found a sliver of peace, the world came knocking again. And it wasn't gentle. It started with a visit I hadn't expected. I was in the living room, sorting through old photos Michael as a boy, Robert and me on our honeymoon, when the doorbell rang. It was mid-morning, the kind of grey day that made you want to stay inside with a quilt. I opened the door to find Diana Parker, Lucas's mother, standing on my porch. She was a striking woman, 65 maybe, with perfectly styled hair and a cashmere coat that looked like it cost more than my car. Her face was composed, but her eyes were sharp, like she was sizing me up. "Mrs. Wilson," she said, her voice clipped but polite. "May I come in? We need to discuss something important." I hesitated, my hand still on the doorknob. I'd met Diana only a few times Michael's wedding, a charity gala she'd hosted in Westfield. She'd always been distant, her smiles as polished as her pearls. But I nodded, stepping aside. "Of course, Mrs. Parker. Would you like some coffee?" "No, thank you," she said, stepping into the living room. Her eyes flicked over the faded sofa, the family photos on the mantel, and I felt a pang of self-consciousness. My home was nothing like the Parkers' mansion, with its marble floors and Persian rugs. She sat on the edge of the couch, her posture rigid, and I took the armchair across from her, bracing myself. "Mrs. Wilson," she began, folding her hands in her lap, "I understand you've decided to stop supporting Michael and Lucas financially. Lucas told me about your disagreement at the diner. I'm here to ask you to reconsider." I stared at her, the words sinking in. "Reconsider," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Mrs. Parker, I'm not sure you understand. Lucas has been gambling with the money I sent, money I worked years to earn. I paid off Michael's student loans, $121,000, and gave up my retirement for it. I co-signed a loan for them, and Lucas used it for betting. I can't keep doing this." Diana's lips tightened, but she didn't flinch. "I'm aware of Lucas's indiscretions," she said, her voice cool. "He's always been impulsive, but he's under tremendous pressure. Our family has a certain standing in Westfield, and appearances matter. If word got out about his behavior, it would be devastating not just for Lucas, but for Michael, for all of us. Surely you can see that." I leaned back, my hands gripping the arms of the chair. "What I see," I said, my voice low, "is that I've given everything to keep your son's world spinning. I worked night shifts until my back ached, skipped meals to save $1, let my own home fall apart. And for what? So Lucas could buy a Rolex while I stood outside their house on Thanksgiving, not welcome at my own son's table." Diana's eyes narrowed, but she kept her composure. "I understand you're upset, Mrs. Wilson, but cutting them off so abruptly, without warning, it's causing chaos. Lucas is distressed. Michael is caught in the middle, and frankly, it's affecting our family's plans. We're hosting a holiday gala soon, with important guests. We can't have this mess hanging over us." I almost laughed, the absurdity of it hitting me. A holiday gala. That was her concern. I thought about the years I'd spent believing love meant sacrifice, giving until I had nothing left. I'd paid off Michael's loans, sent money to Lucas, worked until I could barely stand, and now Diana Parker was sitting in my living room, asking me to keep the facade intact for her social calendar. "Mrs. Parker," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I've lost too much to keep up appearances for anyone. I paid off Michael's loans to give him a future, not to fund Lucas's gambling. I've worked 60-hour weeks, let my roof leak, given up my dreams. I'm not doing it anymore. If you're worried about Lucas, maybe you should help him get him into treatment. Not a gala." Her face hardened, and for a moment, I saw a flash of something anger, maybe or shame. "You don't understand our world," she said, standing. "In Westfield, reputation is everything. Lucas made mistakes, but he's our son. We can't just expose him. I was hoping you'd be reasonable, for Michael's sake." "I am being reasonable," I said, standing to meet her gaze. "For my sake. I've given enough. Lucas needs help. Real help. And so does Michael. But it's not my job to fix them." She adjusted her coat, her movements sharp. "Very well," she said. "I'll tell Lucas and Michael they'll need to find another way. But don't be surprised if this strains things with your son. He's part of our family now." The words stung, but I held my ground. "He'll always be my son," I said, "and I'll love him, no matter what. But I won't let him or you define my worth." She left without another word, the door closing softly behind her. I stood there, my heart racing, the silence of the house wrapping around me. I thought about Robert, how he'd always said I was stronger than I knew. "You've got a backbone. Barb," he'd tease, kissing my forehead. I hadn't felt it then, but I did now. I needed to clear my head. So I bundled up and walked to the community center, where I'd signed up for another painting class. The snow crunched under my boots, and the air was sharp with the promise of more to come. The center was warm, its windows fogged from the heat inside. Maria was there, setting up her canvas, and she waved me over. "Miss Barbara, you're back, ready to paint something amazing." I smiled, the tension from Diana's visit easing. "I'll settle for not spilling paint on myself," I said, tying on a smock. The class was small, just a handful of us, and the teacher had us painting a winter landscape, snowy hills. A lone pine tree. I mixed blues and whites, my brush moving with more confidence than before. As I painted, I thought about Diana's words, her insistence on appearances. I'd spent years trying to be the perfect mother, giving everything to Michael. But it had cost me my own light. Now, with each stroke of the brush, I was claiming it back. After class, I stopped by the library where a flyer caught my eye. Support group for families of problem gamblers. It met weekly in the community center's basement. Starting that evening, I hesitated, my fingers tracing the paper. I'd never been one for groups, always too busy working or worrying about Michael. But Clara's email, Lucas's gambling, Michael's denial they were too much to carry alone. I tore off the flyer and tucked it in my purse. That night, I walked into the basement room. A plain space with folding chairs and a coffee maker humming in the corner. A dozen people sat in a circle, their faces tired but open. The facilitator, a woman named Joan with a gentle voice, welcomed me. "We're here to share, not to judge," she said. "If you're ready, tell us why you came." I took a deep breath, the smell of stale coffee grounding me. "I'm Barbara," I said, my voice shaky. "My son's husband, Lucas, has a gambling problem. I've been giving them money for years, thinking I was helping. I even paid off my son's student loans. $120,000 to give him a future. But Lucas used my money to gamble. And my son, he's caught in the middle. I stopped the money, but I feel like I'm losing him." The room was quiet, but their eyes were kind, full of understanding. A man across from me, maybe 70, spoke up. "I gave my daughter everything too," he said. "Car, house, you name it. She spent it all on slots. Cutting her off was the hardest thing I ever did, but it saved her. She's in recovery now." A woman next to him nodded. "It's not abandoning them," she said. "It's giving them a chance to face themselves. You're not alone, Barbara." Their words were like a balm, soothing a wound I hadn't realized was so deep. I listened as others shared stories of spouses, children, siblings lost to addiction. I wasn't the only one who'd given too much, who'd thought love meant sacrifice. For the first time, I felt seen, not as Michael's mother or Lucas's bank, but as Barbara, a woman trying to find her way. I drove home under a starry sky, the snow glowing faintly. The house was dark, but I lit a fire, watching the flames dance. I thought about Diana's visit, her plea to keep Lucas's secrets. I thought about the group, their stories of loss and hope. I remembered a moment from years ago, when Robert and I sat by this same fireplace, planning our future. "You're my home, Barb," he'd said, his hand warm in mine. I'd lost that home when he died, and I'd tried to rebuild it with Michael. But now I was building something new for me. I stood and walked to the mantel, touching the photo of Michael. "I love you," I whispered, "but I can't carry you anymore." The fire crackled, and I felt a quiet strength, like the roses in my garden, waiting under the snow for spring. I wasn't done fighting, but I was done fighting for someone else's life. It was time to fight for mine. The winter nights in Oak Ridge were long and quiet, the kind that made you feel like the world was holding its breath. I sat by the fireplace, a quilt draped over my lap, watching the flames flicker against the dark. The house smelled faintly of cedar, a scent that always reminded me of Robert, and the clock on the mantel ticked its steady rhythm. I'm Barbara Wilson, and if you've been with me, you know the weight of standing firm against Lucas's manipulations, of facing Diana Parker's pleas to keep their family's secrets. I'd paid off Michael's $120,000 student loan, given up my retirement to give him a future, only to learn Lucas was gambling it all away. I'd joined a painting class, a gardening club, even gone on a date with Richard, but the ache of losing Michael to Lucas's lies lingered. Now, as the snow piled up outside, I was about to see just how far Lucas had fallen and how much strength it would take to keep my boundaries. It happened on a Wednesday evening, a week after Diana's visit. I was in the kitchen, chopping onions for a pot of soup, when the doorbell rang. The sound startled me, sharp in the quiet house, and I wiped my hands on a dish towel, my heart picking up speed. I opened the door to find Lucas standing on the porch, his coat rumpled, his hair uncombed. The charm that usually clung to him was gone, replaced by a haggard look, dark circles under his eyes, a faint tremor in his hands. He looked smaller, like the weight of his choices had finally caught up. "Mother Barbara," he said, his voice rough, barely above a whisper. "Can I come in? I need to talk." I hesitated, my hand tightening on the doorknob. The last time we'd spoken, at the diner, he'd tried to charm his way out of the truth about his gambling. I'd hung up on him when he called again, begging for money. But seeing him now, broken and shivering in the cold, I felt a pang of something not pity exactly, but recognition. He was Michael's husband, part of my family, whether I liked it or not. "All right," I said, stepping aside. "But this better be honest, Lucas." He nodded. Stepping into the living room, the fire cast shadows across his face, making him look older than his 32 years. He didn't sit, just stood by the mantel, staring at the photo of Michael from his college graduation. "I screwed up," he said, his voice breaking. "I didn't mean for it to get this bad, but it did. I lost everything." I sat in the armchair, keeping distance between us. "What happened?" "Lucas," I asked, my voice calm but firm. "Tell me the truth." He ran a hand through his hair, his eyes darting to the floor. "I went to a casino outside town," he said. "Last night, I thought I could win it back. You know, fix everything. I had $5,000 money we didn't have, and I lost it all. Every penny." Michael's furious. He's talking about leaving me. I don't know what to do. I took a deep breath, the fire crackling in the silence. I thought about the bank statements Clara had sent, the thousands Lucas had gambled on DraftKings. I thought about the $120,000 I'd paid for Michael's loans, the retirement I'd sacrificed, the years of night shifts at St. Mary's. "Lucas," I said, my voice steady, You didn't just lose $5,000. You've been gambling for years, using my money, Michael's money, to chase something you'll never catch. You need help. Professional help, not another bet." His face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought he'd cry. "I know," he whispered. "I know I've got a problem, but I didn't want to be this person. Barbara, I wanted to give Michael the life he deserves, the kind of life my parents have. I thought I could control it, make it all work, but I can't. I'm drowning." I looked at him, seeing not the charming man who'd manipulated me, but a broken one, trapped by his own choices. Part of me wanted to reach out, to comfort him, but I held back. I'd spent too long fixing other people's problems, and it had cost me everything. "Lucas," I said, "I hear you. I see how much you're hurting, but I can't fix this for you. I've given you and Michael all I had, my savings, my health, my future. I paid off Michael's loans, $120,000 to set him free, and you gambled it away. I'm done." He flinched, his eyes wet. "I'm not asking for money," he said, his voice desperate. I need you to talk to Michael. He listens to you. If he leaves me, I don't know what I'll do. Please." "Barbara." I shook my head, the weight of his words heavy but not enough to sway me. "I can't make Michael stay," I said, "and I won't beg him to. He needs to see you for who you are, Lucas, and you need to face yourself. There are programs, Gamblers Anonymous, therapists. I'll give you the number for the support group I joined, but you have to take the first step." He stared at me, his jaw tight, then nodded. A single jerky motion. "Okay," he said, his voice barely audible. I'll think about it." He turned to leave, pausing at the door. "I'm sorry, Barbara, for everything." I didn't answer, just watched him step into the snow, his figure fading into the dark. I closed the door, the lock clicking softly, and leaned against it, my heart pounding. The fire was still burning, but the room felt colder now. I thought about Michael, about the call Lucas said he'd made. Was my son really thinking of leaving? Or was Lucas spinning another story, trying to pull me back in? I walked to the kitchen, where the soup was simmering, the smell of onions and thyme grounding me. I stirred the pot, the wooden spoon familiar in my hand, and remembered a night years ago. When Michael was sick with the flu, I'd made chicken soup, sitting by his bed as he sipped it, his eyes bright with fever. "You're the best, Mom," he'd said, his voice small. I'd thought then that I could always protect him, always make things right. But now I knew I couldn't. He had to face his own battles, just as I was facing mine. The phone rang, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Michael, his voice strained. "Mom," he said, "Lucas just called me. He said he was at your place." "What's going on?" I sat at the table, the soup forgotten. "He was here," I said, choosing my words carefully. "He told me he lost $5,000 at a casino last night. He's scared." "Michael, he says you're thinking of leaving him." There was a long pause, and when Michael spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "I don't know what to do, Mom." He promised he'd stopped, but it's always something, another bet, another excuse. I'm tired of it. I love him, but I can't keep living like this. My heart ached for him, but I kept my voice steady. "I know, sweetheart. I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you what I've learned. You can't save someone who won't save themselves. Lucas needs help, a program, a therapist, and you need to decide what's best for you. I'll love you no matter what, but I can't fix this for you." He was quiet, and I could hear his breathing, heavy and uneven. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said finally, "for everything, for Thanksgiving, for not seeing what Lucas was doing. I didn't know about the loans, about how much you gave up. I've been so stupid." "You're not stupid," I said, tears stinging my eyes. "You're my son, and you're trying to hold on to something you love. But love doesn't mean letting someone hurt you or me. You're stronger than you think. Michael, you'll find your way." We hung up, and I sat there, the fire's glow fading to embers. I thought about the support group, the stories of families torn apart by addiction, and the hope they'd found in letting go. I thought about Lucas, standing in my living room, his desperation raw and real. I wanted to believe he could change, but I knew it wasn't my job to make it happen. The next day, I drove to Ellen's garden, needing the comfort of dirt and growth. The snow was thicker now, covering the tulip bulbs we'd planted, but Ellen was undaunted, tending to her winter pansies. "You look like you've been through it," she said, handing me a thermos of coffee. I smiled, taking a sip. "It's been a week," I said, and told her about Lucas's visit, Michael's call, Diana's pressure. Ellen listened, her hands busy with a trowel, her eyes kind. "You're doing the right thing," she said when I finished. "It's hard, letting go of people you love, but sometimes it's the only way to save them and yourself. You're like those roses out back, Barbara. They've been through hell, but they're still there, waiting for spring." Her words settled in me, warm and steady. I knelt beside her, helping her mulch the pansies, the cold earth grounding me. I thought about Richard, our dinner at Bella Vita, the way his hand had brushed mine. I thought about the painting class, the way the brush felt in my hand, like a piece of myself coming back to life. I'd given everything to Michael and Lucas, my savings, my health, my dreams, but now I was giving to myself, and it felt like a miracle. That night, I sat by the fire, the quilt soft against my skin. The house was quiet, but not empty. The embers glowed, faint but persistent, and I felt them in me. To a fire I'd thought was gone, now burning brighter. I'd faced Lucas, Michael, Diana, and I'd held my ground. I wasn't just surviving, I was living. One small step at a time. I walked to the window, the moonlight casting shadows across the snow. Oak Ridge slept under its winter blanket, but I was awake, seeing the world with new eyes. I thought about the group, the painting class, Ellen's garden, Richard's smile. I thought about Michael, struggling to find his way, and Lucas, drowning in his own choices. I couldn't save them, but I could save myself, and that was enough. The summer sun hung low over Oak Ridge, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Like a canvas I was finally learning to love. I stood in my backyard, the grass soft under my feet, arranging a picnic table with checkered cloths and mason jars filled with daisies. The air smelled of charcoal and grilled corn, and the hum of cicadas mixed with the laughter of neighbors. It was Independence Day, a time for celebration, and, for the first time in years, I was hosting a gathering not for Michael or Lucas, but for me. I'm Barbara Wilson, and if you've been with me, you know the journey I've traveled, the pain of learning Lucas's gambling, the heartbreak of confronting Michael, the courage to say no to Diana Parker's demands. I'd paid off Michael's $120,000 student loan, given up my retirement to give him a future, only to find myself pushed aside. But I'd also found new light painting classes, a gardening club, dinners with Richard, and now, as the 4th of July sparkled ahead, I was ready to claim my own independence. The idea for the barbecue had come from Ellen, my neighbor, who'd insisted we needed to christen the garden we'd been tending. "Your roses are coming back, Barbara," she'd said, her straw hat tipped back. "Let's show 'em off with the party." I'd hesitated, worried about the cost, the effort, the ghosts of family gatherings that never went as planned. But Maria, my young friend from St. Mary's, had chimed in. "Miss Barbara, you deserve a day to shine. I'll bring the potato salad." So here I was, setting out plates, stringing fairy lights through the trees, feeling a joy I hadn't known in years. The backyard was small but alive, the roses blooming red and pink along the fence, the tulip bulbs we'd planted in winter, now promising spring. I'd borrowed folding chairs from the community center, and a portable grill smoked happily, tended by Richard, who'd arrived early with a cooler of lemonade. He looked handsome in a navy polo, his grey hair catching the sunlight, and every time he smiled at me, my heart did a little dance. "You're a natural at this, Barbara," he said, flipping burgers with a grin. "This is going to be a night to remember." I blushed. adjusting a jar of daisies. I hope so, I said. It's been a long time since I threw a party. Ellen bustled over, carrying a tray of cornbread. Long time or not, you're doing it right, she said. Look at this place straight out of a magazine. She winked, nudging me toward Richard. And that man's got eyes for you. Barbara, don't let him get away. I laughed. The sound light and free. The guests started arriving, Maria with her promised potato salad. A few women from the gardening club. Even my sister Linda, who'd driven in from Ohio for the weekend. Linda was 2 years older, her hair a softer grey than mine, her laugh as familiar as our childhood. She hugged me tight, her eyes sparkling. Barb, this is beautiful, she said, looking around the yard. You're blooming, just like those roses. Her words warmed me, and I felt a pang of gratitude. Linda and I hadn't been close in years. Our lives pulled apart by distance and my endless work for Michael. But we'd been talking more lately, long phone calls about everything and nothing, and having her here felt like reclaiming a piece of home. As the evening settled in, the backyard filled with chatter and laughter. Kids from the neighborhood ran through the grass, waving tiny American flags, while the adults swapped stories over plates of burgers and coleslaw. Richard played DJ, hooking up a speaker to his phone, and soon Johnny Cash's Ring of Fire was drifting through the air, making everyone smile. I stood by the grill, sipping lemonade, watching the scene unfold. The fairy lights twinkled, the roses glowed in the dusk, and for a moment, I felt whole, like the pieces of myself I'd lost were coming back together. Then I saw them, Michael and Lucas, standing at the gate, hesitant, like they weren't sure they belonged. My heart skipped, a mix of hope and fear. I hadn't seen Michael since our fight, when he'd stormed out after I told him about Lucas's gambling, Lucas's visit. His confession about losing $5,000 at the casino had left me shaken but resolute. I'd told Michael he had to face the truth, and now, here they were, on my turf, under the glow of a 4th of July sky. I walked over, my hands clasped to steady myself. Michael, I said, my voice soft but clear. Lucas, I didn't expect you. Michael looked tired, his eyes shadowed, but he managed a small smile. Hey, Mom, Linda mentioned the barbecue. We wanted to come. Is that okay? I glanced at Lucas, who stood a step behind. His usual polish gone. He was in a plain t-shirt, his hair uncombed, his hands stuffed in his pockets. He met my eyes, his expression raw, almost pleading. Barbara, he said, his voice low. I'm trying. I started going to Gamblers Anonymous. 2 weeks now. I'm not asking for anything, just a chance to be here. I took a deep breath, the air warm with the scent of charcoal and flowers. I thought about the support group I'd joined, the stories of families finding their way through addiction. I thought about the $120,000 I'd paid for Michael's loans, the years I'd given to keep their world spinning. I thought about the roses, the tulips, the painting class, the life I was building for myself. You're welcome to stay, I said, my voice firm but not unkind. But I need you to know something. I love you, Michael, and I want you to be happy. Lucas, but I'm not paying for your mistakes anymore. This is my home, my day, and I'm choosing me. Michael's eyes filled with tears, and he stepped forward, hugging me tight. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered, for everything, for not seeing you, for letting Lucas. I've been so blind. I held him, my heart aching but full. You're here now, I said, pulling back to look at him. That's a start. Lucas nodded, his voice barely audible. I'm not perfect, Barbara. I'm nowhere close, but I'm trying for Michael, for you, for me. Thank you for letting us stay. I gestured to the table, where plates of food waited. Go eat, I said, a small smile breaking through. There's plenty. They joined the party, tentative at first, but soon Michael was talking with Linda, his laugh a sound I hadn't heard in years. Lucas sat quietly, eating a burger, watching the kids with their flags. I stood by Richard, who slipped an arm around my waist, his touch steady. You're amazing. You know that, he said, his voice low. Letting them in. But on your terms. That takes strength. I leaned into him, the warmth of his presence grounding me. I'm learning, I said. It's not easy, but it's right. The night deepened, and the sky erupted in fireworks, bursts of red, white, and blue over Oak Ridge. Everyone gathered in the yard, faces tilted up, the kids squealing with delight. I stood with Richard, Linda, Ellen, and Maria, my heart full. I thought about the Thanksgiving when I'd stood outside Michael's house. Unwanted, holding a pie that never made it to the table. I thought about the years I'd given night shifts, skipped meals, the $120,000 I'd paid to set Michael free. I'd lost so much, but I'd found something to myself. Michael came over, Lucas trailing behind. "Mom," he said, his voice soft. "This is incredible. I forgot how much I love this us together. Like this." I smiled, touching his arm. "We're still family." "Michael, always will be. But it's different now. I'm not just your mom. I'm Barbara, and I'm living for me, too." He nodded, his eyes bright. "I get it, and I'm proud of you. I'm trying to figure things out with Lucas. It's hard, but we're working on it." Lucas looked at me, his expression earnest. "I'm 2 weeks in. Barbara, it's not much, but it's something. I want to be better for Michael, for you." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I wanted to believe him, but I knew recovery was a long road, one he'd have to walk himself. For now, it was enough that he was here, trying, and that Michael was beside him, not hiding from the truth. The fireworks faded, leaving a starry sky. The guests began to drift home, their voices soft in the warm night. Linda hugged me, whispering, "You're stronger than I ever knew." "Barb." Ellen clapped me on the shoulder, promising to plan a full garden party. Maria gave me a high five, her grin wide. "Best barbecue ever." Miss Barbara. Richard stayed to help clean up, stacking chairs under the fairy lights. "You did good tonight," he said, his eyes warm. "Not just the party, but everything. You're building something beautiful." I looked at the yard, the roses glowing in the moonlight, the table still scattered with crumbs and laughter. "I'm trying," I said, my voice soft. "It's new, but it feels like home." He took my hand, his fingers gentle. "You're my home, Barbara," he said, and I felt a warmth spread through me, like the first light of dawn. I walked him to his car, the night quiet except for the crickets. Michael and Lucas had left, their silhouettes fading down the street. I stood on the porch, the swing creaking softly, and looked at the sky. The stars were bright, and I felt them in me, too, a constellation of hope, of strength, of a life I was finally claiming. I'd given everything to Michael and Lucas, but tonight, I'd given something to myself, a day of joy, a family of friends, a chance to shine. The leaves were turning again in Oak Ridge, painting the town in shades of gold and crimson, a quiet promise of change. I stood in my garden, the morning air crisp against my skin, clipping back the roses that had bloomed so fiercely through the summer. The petals were soft, their scent lingering like a memory of the 4th of July. When I'd hosted that barbecue under a sky bursting with fireworks. I'm Barbara Wilson, and if you've been with me, you know the road I've traveled, the sting of standing outside Michael's door on Thanksgiving, the shock of Lucas's gambling, the courage to set boundaries with my son and his husband. I'd paid off Michael's $120,000 student loan, given up my retirement to give him a future, only to find myself pushed aside. But I'd also found a new life, painting classes, a gardening club, a budding romance with Richard, and now, as autumn settled over Pennsylvania, I was stepping into a season of my own. The decision to retire from St. Mary's Hospital had come after the barbecue. A quiet choice made over coffee at my kitchen table. I'd worked there for decades, my hands steady through countless nights in the cardiac unit, but the long shifts had taken their toll. I'd given up my savings to pay off Michael's loans, then drained the last of it to clear the loan I'd co-signed for him and Lucas. At 62, I was tired, not just in my body, but in my soul. I met with Richard, who was more than my chief of medicine now, and told him I was ready to step back. "Barbara," he said, his eyes kind over his office desk, "you've been the heart of this hospital, but you deserve to rest, to live for you. We'll miss you. But I'm proud of you." I smiled, a weight lifting. "I'll still volunteer a day a week," I said. "I can't stay away completely." He chuckled, reaching for my hand. I wouldn't expect anything less. Retirement felt strange at first, like slipping out of a skin I'd worn too long. The first Monday without a shift, I woke at dawn, unsure what to do with the hours. But I found my rhythm in the small things: morning coffee on the porch swing, tending the roses with Ellen, sketching in the community centre's art room. The painting class had become a weekly ritual. Maria's laughter a constant as we tried to capture the hills of Oak Ridge on canvas. "You're getting good, Miss Barbara," she'd say, nudging my elbow. "Gonna sell these at the farmer's market soon." I'd laugh, shaking my head. I'm just happy to hold a brush without shaking. But it was more than that. Each stroke, each color, was a piece of myself I was reclaiming. I'd spent years giving night shifts, money, my dreams to Michael and Lucas, but now I was giving to me. The roses in my garden were proof, their blooms brighter than they'd been in years. And I felt like them, coming back to life after a long winter. One afternoon, I drove to the cafe on Main Street, a cozy spot with mismatched chairs and the smell of fresh waffles. I was meeting Richard to plan a trip we'd been dreaming about a week in Sedona, Arizona, to see the red rocks and catch the sunrise. The idea had started as a whim, something we'd tossed around over dinner at Bella Vita, but it had grown into a promise. I sat by the window, sipping tea, a travel brochure open on the table, its glossy photos of desert landscapes glowing in the sunlight. Richard arrived, his grey hair catching the light, his smile warm as he slid into the seat across from me. "You're early," he said, teasing. "Already planning our escape." I laughed, pushing the brochure toward him. "Just dreaming. Look at these cliffs." "Richard, can you imagine waking up to that?" He took my hand, his fingers gentle. "I can imagine waking up to you," he said, his voice low. "The cliffs are just a bonus." I blushed, my heart fluttering. At 62, I hadn't expected to feel this way again, like a young woman with a future full of possibility. Richard and I had grown close since that first dinner. Our dates a mix of quiet moments, concerts, walks in the park, and deeper talks about loss, love, and the lives we still wanted to live. He'd lost his wife, Emily, to cancer years ago, and I'd lost Robert to a heart attack. We understood each other's scars, but we also saw each other's light. "I was thinking," Richard said, flipping through the brochure, "we could rent a little place in Sedona, maybe hike the trails. What do you say?" Barbara ready for an adventure. I looked at him, his eyes crinkling with excitement, and felt a warmth spread through me. "I'm ready," I said, meaning it. "Let's do it." We spent the next hour planning, laughing over maps and hotel reviews, the cafe's hum a comforting backdrop. As we left, Richard kissed my cheek, his lips soft against my skin. "You're my favorite adventure, Barbara," he said, and I walked to my car feeling like the sun was shining inside me. That evening, I was in the garden, watering the roses, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Clara, Lucas's sister, asking to meet. I hadn't spoken to her since her email, the one that revealed Lucas's gambling, and I felt a mix of curiosity and caution. We agreed to meet at the cafe the next day, and I went to bed with a restless mind, wondering what she wanted. Clara was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth, her dark hair pulled back, her face softer than I remembered. She stood to hug me, her embrace brief but warm. "Mrs. Wilson," she said, sitting down, "thank you for coming. I owe you an apology." I stirred my tea, the steam rising in curls. "You don't owe me anything, Clara. Your email changed everything. If you hadn't shown me those bank statements, I might still be sending money to Lucas." She shook her head, her eyes tired. "I should have spoken up sooner. Lucas is my brother, and I love him, but he's hurt a lot of people. You? Michael's, our parents. I was too scared to confront him until I saw how much you were giving up. I'm sorry for what my family put you through, my mother. Especially, I thought about Diana's visit. Her plea to keep Lucas's secrets for the sake of their reputation. Your mother was protecting her son, I said. I understand that. I did the same for Michael, for too long. I paid off his student loans, $120,000, thinking it would keep us close. But it didn't. I had to learn to protect myself, too. Clara nodded, her expression earnest. You're stronger than I thought. Mrs. Wilson, most people would have kept giving or walked away completely. But you found a way to love Michael and still stand your ground. That's why I wanted to meet. Lucas told me he's been going to Gamblers Anonymous, and I think he means it this time. He and Michael are trying, but it's not easy. I sipped my tea, letting her words settle. I know, I said. They came to my barbecue on the 4th. Lucas said he's 2 weeks in and Michael's supporting him. I want to believe they'll make it, but I've learned I can't carry their weight. They have to do the work. You've given them a chance, Clara said, her voice soft. That's more than most would do. I just wanted to thank you for Michael, for Lucas, for showing me what strength looks like. Her words caught me off guard, and I felt a lump in my throat. Thank you. Clara, I said, that means more than you know. We parted with a promise to stay in touch, and I drove home. The autumn leaves swirling around my car. The cafe's warmth lingered in me. A reminder that even in the mess of family, there were moments of connection. I thought about Lucas, his confession in my living room, his tentative steps toward recovery. I thought about Michael, his apology at the barbecue, his struggle to find his way. They were still my family, but I wasn't their savior anymore. I was Barbara, and I was enough. Back home, I walked to the garden, the roses catching the last light of day. Ellen had helped me prune them, and they stood tall, their blooms a testament to care and time. I thought about a moment years ago, when Robert and I had planted these roses together, laughing as we dug in the dirt. They'll outlast us. Barb, he'd said, his hands muddy, his smile bright. He'd been right, in a way. The roses had survived, and so had I. That night, I sat by the fireplace, a sketchbook open on my lap. I was working on a drawing of the Sedona Cliffs, inspired by the brochure. The lines rough but full of hope. The fire crackled, its glow soft against the walls. I thought about the painting class, the gardening club, the support group's small steps that had led me here, to a life I hadn't dared dream of. I thought about Richard, his hand in mine, his promise of a sunrise in the desert. I'd given everything to Michael and Lucas, my savings, my health, my heart, but now I was giving to myself. And it felt like a gift. I walked to the mantel, touching the photo of Michael, his graduation smile frozen in time. I love you, I whispered, and I'm rooting for you. But the words weren't heavy anymore. They were light, like the leaves falling outside, a promise of a new season. I was ready for it, Sedona, Richard, a canvas waiting for color. I was ready to live. The autumn air in Oak Ridge carried a crispness that felt like a fresh start, the kind that made you want to linger on the porch with a mug of cider. I stood in my living room, the fire crackling in the hearth, its glow dancing across the walls. Outside, the maple trees were shedding their leaves, a golden carpet under the streetlights, and the town was settling into the quiet rhythm of fall. I'm Barbara Wilson, and if you've been with me, you know the road I've walked from the heartbreak of Thanksgiving. When I was turned away from Michael's door, to the shock of Lucas's gambling, to the courage of hosting a 4th of July barbecue where my son and his husband took their first steps toward healing, I'd paid off Michael's $120,000 student loan, given up my retirement to give him a future, only to learn I had to give to myself. 2. I'd retired from St. Mary's, fallen in love with Richard, and found joy in painting and gardening. But tonight, as the fire warmed my home, I was preparing to share my story in a new way, one that would light a path for others. It started with the support group for families of problem gamblers, a weekly meeting in the basement of the Oak Ridge Community Center. I'd joined months ago, after Clara's email revealed Lucas's addiction, and those meetings had become a lifeline. The room was simple folding chairs in a circle, a coffee maker gurgling in the corner, fluorescent lights casting a soft glow, but the people there, with their tired eyes and open hearts, had shown me I wasn't alone. Tonight, the facilitator, Joan, had asked me to share my story, to speak to the group about what I'd learned. I was nervous, my hands fidgeting as I drove to the center, the flyer for the group tucked in my purse like a talisman. The basement was warm when I arrived, the smell of stale coffee and damp concrete oddly comforting. About a dozen people were there, some familiar faces, others new. Joan greeted me with a smile, her grey hair pulled back in a bun. "Barbara, we're so glad you're speaking tonight," she said, squeezing my arm. "Your story's going to help someone, I know it." I nodded, my throat tight. "I hope so," I said. Taking a seat in the circle, the chairs creaked as people settled in, their faces a mix of weariness and hope. I recognized Tom, the older man who'd spoken about his daughter's recovery, and Sarah, a woman my age whose husband had lost their savings to poker. A new face, a woman with silver hair and trembling hands, sat across from me, her eyes fixed on the floor. Joan opened the meeting, her voice gentle. "We're here to share, to listen, to heal," she said. "Tonight, Barbara's going to tell us her story, whenever you're ready." "Barbara," I took a deep breath, the coffee cup in my hands grounding me. "I'm Barbara," I began, my voice steady despite the nerves. "And I'm here because my son's husband, Lucas, has a gambling problem. For years, I thought I was helping them, Michael, my son, and Lucas, by giving them money. I paid off Michael's student loans, $120,000, my entire retirement savings, because I wanted him to have a future. I never told him, didn't want him to feel he owed me, but I kept giving, sending money for their house, their bills, their life. I worked night shifts at the hospital, skipped meals, let my own home fall apart. I thought that's what love meant, giving everything, no matter the cost." The room was quiet, their eyes on me, and I felt a strength I hadn't known I had. Then I found out Lucas was gambling it all away. I continued. Thousands of dollars, on betting apps, at casinos. I confronted him, and he lied, tried to charm his way out. I confronted Michael, and he was too scared to face the truth. I stood outside their house on Thanksgiving, holding a pie I'd made, and Lucas told me I didn't belong. That broke something in me, but it also woke me up. I paused, sipping my coffee, the bitterness sharp on my tongue. I stopped the money, I said. I paid off a loan I'd co-signed to protect my credit, used the last of my savings. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, saying no to my son. Every instinct screamed I was abandoning him, but it wasn't abandonment. It was love, the kind that says, you have to face yourself. And I started living for me, painting, gardening, even falling in love again. And slowly, Michael and Lucas are facing their truths. Lucas is in Gamblers Anonymous, 2 weeks now. Michael's supporting him, but it's their journey, not mine. The silver-haired woman across from me was crying, her hands clutching a tissue. I met her eyes, my voice softening. I learned that love doesn't mean giving until you're empty. I said, it means setting boundaries. Even when it hurts, it means choosing yourself, not because you're selfish, but because you're worth it. I'm still learning, still healing, but I'm not alone. You're not alone either. The room erupted in soft applause, and I blushed, surprised by the warmth. Joan smiled, her eyes bright. Thank you, Barbara. That was powerful. Does anyone want to share? The silver-haired woman raised a shaky hand. I'm Ellen, she said, her voice trembling. My son hasn't spoken to me in 3 months. Not since I refused to co-sign another loan for him. He's been gambling, too, and I keep wondering if I did the right thing. Your story. Barbara, it's like you're in my head. I'm so scared he'll hate me forever. I leaned forward, my heart aching for her. I wish I could say it gets easier quickly. I said, I was scared, too. When I stopped helping Michael, but standing firm isn't cruelty, it's courage. It's giving them a chance to find themselves. And you a chance to find you. He might be angry now, but you're showing him what strength looks like. Keep coming here. Ellen, we'll get through it together. She nodded, tears streaming down her face, and I felt a surge of purpose. The group shared more stories, their voices weaving a tapestry of pain and hope. When the meeting ended, Ellen hugged me, her grip fierce. Thank you, she whispered. I needed to hear that. I drove home under a starry sky, the autumn leaves crunching under my tires. The group's words echoed in me. A reminder that healing wasn't just about me, it was about lifting others. 2. I thought about a moment years ago, when Robert and I had sat by the lake, watching the sunset. You've got a gift, Barb, he'd said. You make people feel seen. I hadn't believed him then, but now, I was starting to. Back home, I lit the fire, the logs crackling as the room filled with warmth. I was settling in with the book when the phone rang. It was Linda, my sister, her voice bright through the line. Barb, I'm thinking of coming up for a weekend, she said. Maybe we can bake Mom's apple pie, sit by that fire of yours, and talk like we used to. What do you say? I smiled, picturing her in my kitchen, flour on her cheeks. I'd love that, I said. It's been too long. We talked for an hour, laughing about our childhood running through fields, sneaking cookies from the jar. Linda had always been my anchor, and reconnecting with her felt like finding a piece of myself I'd misplaced. I'm proud of you, Barb, she said before we hung up. You're not just surviving, you're living. Her words stayed with me as I walked to the mailbox, the night air cool against my skin. Among the bills was a plain envelope, no return address. I opened it, my heart skipping when I saw Lucas's handwriting. The letter was short, written in a hurried scrawl. Dear Barbara, I'm 3 months into Gamblers Anonymous now. It's hard, harder than I thought, but I'm sticking with it. Michael's been my rock, even when I don't deserve it. I know I hurt you, took so much from you. I can't undo that, but I'm trying to be better. Thank you for not giving up on us, even when you had every reason to. I hope someday I can make you proud. Lucas. I stood under the porch light, the letter trembling in my hands. I thought about the Lucas who'd stood in my living room, broken and desperate, and the one who'd come to my barbecue, promising to try. 3 months wasn't a cure, but it was a start, and I felt a cautious hope for him, for Michael, for the family we might still be. I went inside, placing the letter on the mantel beside Michael's photo. The fire glowed, its light soft against the walls. I thought about the support group, Ellen's tears, Linda's laugh, Richard's hand in mine. I'd given everything to Michael and Lucas, my savings, my health, my heart, but I'd found something greater myself. I'd paid off Michael's loans, worked until I could barely stand. But now I was working for me, painting, gardening, loving, living. I walked to the window, the stars bright over Oak Ridge. The town slept, its houses warm with light. And I felt that warmth in me, too. I was Barbara Wilson, and I was home not just in this house, but in myself. The road ahead wasn't certain, but I was ready, with a fire in my heart and a new season waiting. The autumn sunlight filtered through the leaves in Oak Ridge, casting a golden glow over the garden where my roses stood tall, their petals vibrant against the fading green. I knelt in the dirt, pruning shears in hand, the air crisp with the scent of earth and fallen leaves. The porch swing creaked softly in the breeze, a reminder of quiet mornings spent dreaming of a new chapter. I'm Barbara Wilson, and if you've walked this road with me, you know the weight of my journey from the cold doorstep of Michael's Thanksgiving, where I was turned away, to the shock of Lucas's gambling, to the courage of finding myself again. I'd paid off Michael's $120,000 student loan, given up my retirement to give him a future, only to learn that love meant boundaries. 2. I'd retired from St. Mary's, fallen in love with Richard, and shared my story with a support group, lighting a path for others. Now, as the season turned, I was ready to step into a life I'd never dared imagine. One where I was enough, just as I was. It was a Saturday morning, and I was packing for Sedona. The trip Richard and I had planned over coffee and travel brochures. The suitcase lay open on my bed, filled with sweaters and hiking boots. A small sketchbook tucked in for the desert landscapes I wanted to capture. The idea of Sedona, its red rocks, its wide skies felt like a promise, a chance to see the world with new eyes. Richard was picking me up tomorrow, and the thought of standing beside him, watching the sunrise, made my heart flutter like it hadn't in years. I was in the kitchen, making a pot of tea, when the doorbell rang. The sound was soft, almost hesitant, and I wiped my hands on a dish towel, curious. I opened the door to find Michael and Lucas standing on the porch, a foil tray in Michael's hands, their faces nervous but warm. Michael's eyes, so like his father's, were bright with something I hadn't seen in a long time, hope. Lucas, still carrying the weight of his struggles, managed a small smile, his hands stuffed in his pockets. "Mom," Michael said, holding out the tray. "We, made you something. Pumpkin pie, like Grandma's recipe. It's not as good as yours, but we tried." I took the tray, the foil warm against my palms, and felt a lump in my throat. "You didn't have to do this," I said, my voice soft. "Come in, both of you." They stepped into the living room, the fire crackling in the hearth, its glow softening the edges of the room. The mantel held the photo of Michael's graduation, the letter Lucas had sent months ago, and a new sketch I'd done of the roses. I set the pie on the counter, the smell of cinnamon and nutmeg filling the kitchen, and gestured to the table. "Sit," I said. "I'll make some tea." Michael sat, his hands fidgeting, while Lucas lingered by the doorway, as if unsure of his place. "We wanted to see you before you left for Sedona," Michael said, his voice low. "Linda told me about your trip. It sounds amazing, Mom. I'm really happy for you." I poured the tea, the steam rising in curls, and sat across from them. "Thank you, Michael," I said, meeting his eyes. "It's a new adventure. I'm excited." Lucas cleared his throat, his voice hesitant. "Barbara, I wanted to say, I'm 4 months sober now. Gamblers Anonymous isn't easy, and I've stumbled a few times, but I'm sticking with it. Michael's been there every step, even when I didn't deserve it. I know I hurt you, took so much from you. That letter I sent it wasn't enough, but I'm trying to be someone you can be proud of." I looked at him, seeing the man who'd stood in this room, broken and desperate, and the one who'd come to my 4th of July barbecue, promising to change. 4 months wasn't a finish line, but it was progress, and I felt a cautious warmth. "I see you trying, Lucas," I said. "That matters. But it's a long road, and you have to keep walking it for you. For Michael, not for me." He nodded, his eyes wet. "I know. I will." Michael reached for my hand, his grip tight. "Mom, I'm sorry for everything for Thanksgiving, for not seeing what Lucas was doing, for letting you carry so much. I didn't know about the loans, the $120,000 you gave up. I've been so caught up in keeping Lucas happy. I forgot how much you gave me. I'm trying to be better, to be the son you deserve." I squeezed his hand, tears stinging my eyes. "You're my son, Michael, and I love you. You don't have to be anything but yourself, but you have to choose your own path. Make your own mistakes. I'll always be here. But I'm not your safety net anymore. I'm living for me, too." He nodded, a tear slipping down his cheek. "I get it, and I'm proud of you, Mom, for everything, the painting, the garden, Richard. You're amazing." I smiled, the weight of his words settling in my heart. We sat there, sipping tea, the pie untouched but a symbol of something new, a family. Flawed but trying, finding its way back together. I thought about a moment years ago, when Michael was 5, and we'd baked the same pie for Robert's birthday. He'd gotten flour on his nose, giggling as I wiped it off. "We're a team. Mommy, he'd said. We were still a team, but the rules had changed, and I was okay with that. They left after an hour, promising to call when I got back from Sedona. I stood on the porch, watching their car disappear down the street, the leaves swirling in their wake. The pie sat on the counter, a quiet gift, and I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. I'd given everything to Michael and Lucas, my savings, my health, my heart, but I'd found something greater myself. That evening, Richard came over, his suitcase packed for Sedona. We sat in the garden, the roses glowing in the fading light, a bottle of wine between us. The air was cool, the stars beginning to peek through the dusk. You ready for this? He asked, his hand resting on mine. I looked at him, his eyes crinkling with that smile I'd come to love. I'm ready, I said, meaning more than the trip. For Sedona, for us, for whatever comes next. He leaned in, kissing me softly, his lips warm against mine. You're my home. Barbara, he said, echoing the words he'd said at the barbecue. I can't wait to see the sunrise with you. I smiled, my heart full. It's going to be beautiful. We talked late into the night, planning hikes, sketching ideas for the desert. I told him about Michael and Lucas, the pie, the tentative steps toward healing. He listened, his hand steady in mine, and I felt seen, not as a mother or a nurse, but as Barbara, a woman with dreams of her own. The next morning, we loaded the car, the suitcase a promise of adventure. I locked the house, the porch swing still creaking, and took one last look at the garden. The roses stood proud, their blooms a testament to care and time. I thought about the support group, Ellen's tears, the strength I'd found in sharing my story. I thought about Linda, our plans to bake Mom's pie, and Ellen's garden, where tulips waited for spring. I thought about the $120,000 I'd paid for Michael's future, the nights I'd worked until dawn, the dreams I'd let go. I'd lost so much, but I'd gained more: a life, a love, a self I was proud to call mine. As we drove out of Oak Ridge, the town glowed under the autumn sun, its brick storefronts and maple-lined streets a familiar embrace. The radio played Harvest Moon, Neil Young's voice soft and wistful, and I leaned back, Richard's hand on mine. I thought about a moment years ago, when Robert and I had driven these same roads, dreaming of a future we'd never fully live. You're my light, Barb, he'd said, his voice warm. I'd carried that light through loss, through pain, through the long years of giving too much. Now it was shining again, not for anyone else, but for me. Sedona waited, its red rocks a canvas for new memories. Richard and I would hike its trails, sketch its cliffs, watch its sunrises. Michael and Lucas would walk their own path, stumbling but trying. And I'd cheer them on, not as their savior, but as their mother, their family. I'd paint, garden, love, live, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I looked out the window, the leaves falling like golden confetti, and felt a truth settle in my heart. Life was like an autumn day, fleeting but full of beauty, and I was finally living it. I'd given everything: my savings, my health, my heart, but the greatest gift was the one I'd given myself, the knowledge that I was worthy not of sacrifice, but of joy. As the road stretched ahead, I smiled, the sunlight warm on my face, and knew that no matter what came next, I was home.